What's up, guys? Coming at you here with a demonstration video of my Rescue 1 SSTO. This vessel makes it to orbit with just enough fuel left over to rendezvous with any other ships you might need to perform a rescue or whatever. So we're going to go ahead and start the video here. And right off the hop, I'm going to set it at a nice throttle level where we'll make it out of the first part of the atmosphere without exceeding that 300 meter per second mark and seeing that dynamic pressure effect on the vessel. So it's just less wind resistance. You get more fuel efficiency that way if you don't push yourself through it. You'd probably still make orbit if you just like punch through it at full throttle, but I'm just trying to make it with a little bit of leftover delta V. So once we hit 50 meters per second here, we're going to go ahead and point nose down to just below 70 degrees of elevation here, and that way the prograde vector should fall right around 60 degrees of elevation. So now we'll just go ahead and maintain this until we reach 300 meters per second and exit that first layer of the atmosphere. Once we do clear the first layer of the atmosphere, we will switch prograde and increase our thrust. Alright, so we're out of the first layer, we're over 300 meters per second. We're going to switch prograde, increase thrust, and then we can just maintain that until we reach a nice solid apoapsis of about, well, I think we'll start pointing nose down around like 55 kilometers or something like that. We'll see in a second. I'm no expert on efficient launches to orbit, so if you know a better way, please tell me. I'm always willing to learn new stuff, but this is the way I know how to do it. It seems to work well enough. Eventually, the velocity will switch from surface to orbital, and then you see our prograde vector changes a little bit there as well, and we'll just switch to stability assist so we can point down closer to the horizon. We don't want to point too low because then we'll get our speed up higher before we exit the atmosphere, and then we might start to burn up a little bit. But yeah, we'll just point a little bit above horizon and get our apoapsis up to, we're going to aim for like 71.5 kilometers. Just so that we have that little bit of extra. I don't want to be right on the edge of orbit. I want to be safely in orbit. If you're unfamiliar with the game tends to drag you down if you're below 70 kilometer orbital radius. So, yeah, just try to get above that. So obviously aim for whatever you want, but I find a low Kerbal orbit is the best. Like, the lower the better. That way, any ship you're trying to rendezvous with in orbit, when it's a low Kerbal orbit, they're usually around like 75 to 80 kilometers. So this will make it so you can catch up to them fairly quickly. Now, we're still a little far away to use the thrusters from the apoapsis, so we're just going to use the RCS until we get closer here. This just helps us bleed off a little extra mass and gain a little bit more velocity while we wait. Save a little extra liquid fuel. Now we'll increase our thrust a little. So the reason I'm not going full throttle is because I don't want that apoapsis to get away from us, because then it'll just get too high. I want to try to maintain it at this low 72 kilometer mark. Alright, so we're just about to get our periapsis above ground here. So let us get a little closer to the apoapsis, and then we'll circularize. Just a bit more to go. And there we go, we've made orbit. So there we go, nice 72 kilometer radius orbit. It's about 30 minutes to 30-minute orbital period. It's not bad. Or wait, yeah, period. 30-minute, 42 seconds. There it is. So the eagle-eyed of you, or those of you that actually bothered to read the description, may have noticed that there's a little funny flavor text in there for you. Yeah, this thing doesn't come equipped with any kind of landing systems. There's no landing gear, there's no parachutes, and obviously we don't have enough fuel remaining for the landing burn. So what we're going to do instead is we're just going to get Kerbal in the sunlight, or Kerbal Space Center in the sunlight here, so we can do a nice daylight landing. Alright, so now we're on the opposite side of the planet to Kerbal Space Center. We're going to use our RCS. So we don't really need to point retrograde here, but that's how I did it. I think in my mind I was thinking I was going to use the thrusters. But yeah, so we point retrograde, and then we're going to enable RCS and just do some thrusting with the RCS to get that periapsis down to about 60 kilometers. Takes a little while. RCS is not very powerful, that's why it's like not something you can use to actually get to orbit at any altitude. But once you're in orbit, it's good enough for some maneuvers. And for deorbiting, obviously. This won't get us all the way to the ground, but with the wings on this craft, at 60 kilometers, we could get enough drag to bring us down the rest of the way. That's not how we're going to do it. I'm going to do it a little quicker than that, just for the demonstration purposes. So we'll just hold this retrograde angle. As you can see, my periapsis is already starting to fall. There's quite a bit of drag on this vessel, even just pointed retrograde like this. Even pointed prograde, you'll still get quite a bit of drag. Where I'm pointing with the mouse right now is where I'm going to do my final burn. So I'll put a node here. You don't need to. Just burn whenever you feel like it. Try to use up as much of your fuel as possible before you do re-enter. You could make it if you're careful with it, with a little bit of fuel on board, but it does tend to, the added weight does tend to cause you to heat up a little more on re-entry. Best to just get rid of it. Again, you don't need to do a re-entry burn at all. You could just drag yourself down by slowly dipping into the atmosphere and pointing nose up or nose down, however you want to do it, to slow yourself, drop your periapsis, whatever. Now for the demonstration video, I did try to aim for KSP, so that's why I am burning where I am. The danger, of course, is that I don't make it over the continent, and I'm forced to do a ground landing. That would be bad, because Kerbal Space Program doesn't have the programming for sliding on ground. The parts have a maximum tolerance velocity for impacts, and whether that's horizontal velocity or vertical velocity makes no difference. The only place it does make a difference is in the water. That's why in the water you can do a much faster landing. You can be, as long as it's not vertical velocity, you can be moving at about 70 meters per second and still survive that with no real issue. You might lose, like at 70 meters per second. I've never tried that speed, but if you touch at that speed, you might like lose your solar panels or something. Nothing too bad. But if your vertical velocity exceeds, I think, I can't remember if it's like 11 meters per second on these parts. It's different for each part. But yeah, if your vertical velocity exceeds that, when you go to touchdown in the water, then you'll destroy some parts. So you got to try not to do that. So right now we're going to point nose down. We've already done our burn, so now we're just kind of manipulating our vectors to try to get more drag and reduce our velocity as much as possible before we get into the thicker part of the atmosphere. You don't want to hit the thicker part with too much speed, because then you will burn up. There's no heat shields on this craft. I did make a version of it with a radiator kind of blocking a Science Junior that was positioned behind the spare seats, the passenger seats. And that worked well to get the Science Junior to survive re-entry. But it's still a delicate landing process. Anyways, we're just going to hold this vector, get our periapsis nice and low. And then once we get a little bit lower, we can bleed off our speed in the atmosphere. The only reason I'm pointing nose down like this is just to try to get low enough that I can actually make it to Kerbal Space Center without overshooting. Normally, you would want to keep the nose up a little bit to be safe. There's a bunch of sensitive stuff on the top of this craft that could be destroyed. But yeah, just wanted to aim for the Space Center, you know, get as close as possible. In a second here, I will nose up a little bit. Just to keep our vertical velocity low. Don't want that heating to get out of control now, do we? Luckily, the ship has plenty of, like, actual pitch control with these AT winglets and delta wings. I also have plenty of power on board with my 6 spare batteries. So I don't have to worry about running out of power. Now that I'm pointed nose up, you can see my apoapsis is catching up with me, which is a good thing. You want to keep it as close to you as possible. If your apoapsis is close to you, that means that your vertical velocity is low. Right? You're not falling quickly. You may be traveling quickly, but you're not falling quickly. And then once we get below 2,000 meters of orbital velocity, that should be about, 1650 meters per second of surface velocity-ish. So we can point nose down now. We don't have to really be too scared. We're not in the thicker part of the atmosphere yet, so it's not going to hurt us. It'll help us slow our speed. And by the time we do get to that thicker part, we'll be way below the threshold for that, so it won't hurt us. If we don't point nose down like this, we will overshoot KSP. We are pretty close to it already. So for the demonstration purposes, I'm going to be pretty aggressive with it here. Obviously, you don't need to do this. However, I would keep your nose pointed down once you are below, like, the speed of sound or something, you know? Just to keep your speed up high enough that you're not falling vertically before you get to your landing altitude. Because you want to, like, try to level off at about 100 meters and try to just kind of maintain level flight while you slowly fall into the ocean. You'll see what I mean in a moment here. So with the drag of the vessel, you will lose quite a bit of speed in level flight. Obviously, I'm pretty comfortable with this vessel. I can be risky. As you can see, I'm still pointed down, but I'm losing a lot of velocity at the same time. So we just try to get it nice and smooth so we're not approaching the water too quickly. I'll start to gain a tiny bit of altitude here, but as long as you don't go too high, it's fine. Once my speed drops, I'll start to lose altitude again and smoothly touch down into the water. Nice and smooth. Now, if I had saved any liquid fuel, I could push myself over to the shore. Unfortunately, with the monopropellant I have left, I don't think that's going to be enough to get me there. Yeah, I'm a little bit far away. So, the pros and cons of this vessel, obviously it's a great low Kerbal orbit rescue vessel. You can get up there pretty efficiently for a low cost. And when I say low cost, I mean to assemble this craft, it only costs a little over 13,000. And then once you recover the vessel, you get about 10 to 12,000 back. So you get to orbit for like 1 to 3 grand. Very cheap orbital vessel, very cheap rescue. I'm gonna go ahead and recover the vessel. Obviously, you could remove the lights and the docking port if you want to improve your efficiency a little bit. Yeah, as you can see, I got my 8 science, and if we go over to the parts tab, you'll see I recovered 12,320 funds. So, not a bad price to get to orbit. Anyways, guys, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like, and if you'd like to download this ship for yourself, there will be a link in the description for the Steam page. So try it out for yourself and let me know how you like it. Till next time, guys, I'm Beast Borden. Have a good one.